One tiny mistake can change the world, and today, we're counting down the unbelievable moments where a single human error rewrote history. Let's get started. Number 10. The guy who started the blackout of 2003. Ohio, USA, one mistake, 55 million people affected. Picture this. You're at work, scrolling through emails, eating chips, maybe ignoring a few alerts because you'll check them later. Now, imagine your procrastination knocks out electricity in 8 U.S. states and parts of Canada, affects 55 million people, causes nuclear plants to shut down, halts airports, and leaves New York City in pitch-black chaos. That's exactly what happened in 2003. One power company employee, whose name is mercifully hidden from history, ignored a series of small alerts indicating that a software tool monitoring grid health had crashed. He assumed it would restart on its own. Spoiler, it did not. Then trees, yes, literal trees, touched high-voltage lines because they hadn't been trimmed properly. Usually the system reroutes power, but the software was down. Nobody noticed the overload. The grid domino collapsed like a house of cards held together with tape. Hospitals switched to emergency generators. New Yorkers got stuck in elevators for hours. Airports shut down. People slept on sidewalks. The stock market froze. Millions of dollars were lost. All because one overworked guy didn't act on a tiny red blinking icon. The most terrifying part? This wasn't sabotage, not terrorism, not a cyber attack. Just one employee overwhelmed, understaffed, and hoping the system would sort itself out. The 2003 blackout is still considered one of the largest in world history, triggered by nothing more than normal human behavior, putting off a problem until it becomes a catastrophe. A reminder to all of us, life isn't destroyed by big mistakes. It's usually destroyed by the small ones we ignore. Number 9, the man who accidentally lost a country. The blunder of Pedro of Brazil, 1831. Imagine you're arguing with your dad. Now, imagine you're the emperor of Brazil and your "I'm done with this family" moment accidentally triggers a nationwide political collapse. That was Pedro the Firm, a dramatic king with the emotional stability of a shaken soda can. It started with unrest. People were mad at taxes, corruption, and the fact that Pedro had the tendency to do impulsive Netflix drama-level things. Tension grew, and then Pedro decided to fix everything with one bold move. He abdicated, as in, "Fine, you rule the empire then, I'm out." He thought it would calm the nation, prove a point, make people appreciate him. Basically the royal version of slamming the door during an argument, except it backfired. Badly. Brazil got thrown into chaos. His kid, 5-year-old Pedro II, was suddenly emperor. Imagine a toddler being handed a whole empire like it's a Happy Meal toy. While politicians scrambled to figure out whose job it actually was to rule the place, rebellions erupted across the country. Regions tried to break away. People literally fought wars because Pedro the Firm couldn't handle criticism. Historians agree, Pedro didn't intentionally sabotage Brazil. He simply made the worst possible decision at the worst possible moment because someone hurt his royal feelings. It was a world-changing example of how one person's moment of emotional meltdown, one bad reaction, one impulsive decision can reshape an entire continent. It wasn't an assassination. It wasn't a coup. It wasn't even a conspiracy. Brazil nearly fractured because one emperor said, "I quit." A single mistake. A continent-level domino effect. Peak history energy. Number 8. The librarian who erased 400,000 years of knowledge. Alexandria, 48 BCE. One man tried to help. Imagine being so dedicated to helping that you accidentally burn down the most important library in human history. That's basically what happened when a Roman soldier, trying to assist Julius Caesar during a naval battle, made a decision that would vaporize centuries of science, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and knowledge humanity will never get back. Here's the scene. Caesar was trapped in Alexandria. Enemy ships were closing in. Someone shouted, "Burn the Egyptian fleet so they can't attack." A reasonable strategy in theory. If you don't do it near the Library of Alexandria, the world's biggest knowledge hub. So the soldier, whose name was thankfully never recorded, probably to spare him eternal roasting, lit the ships on fire. Except, the flames spread. Wooden docks ignited. Nearby warehouses caught fire. Wind carried embers across the city. And then, the Library of Alexandria began to burn. Scrolls from Greece, Persia, India, Mesopotamia, Egypt, documents containing lost inventions, early astronomy, philosophical debates, medical knowledge, all turned to ash because one guy didn't consider wind direction. Modern historians say not all of the library burned, but thousands upon thousands of scrolls were destroyed. Entire branches of ancient science vanished in an afternoon. Imagine lighting a candle and accidentally deleting Wikipedia. People still argue about what exactly was lost. Advanced Egyptian medicine, early models of the solar system, texts from lost civilizations, proto-technologies, scientific theories that never resurfaced. One soldier, one match, one world-changing inferno. The worst part? He wasn't even trying to destroy knowledge, he was just following orders. Poorly. It remains one of the largest intellectual casualties in human history, all because someone didn't double-check where the fire would spread. The ultimate my bad. Number 7. The typo that almost started. World War III, 1979, one wrong line of code. Imagine sitting in a secure military bunker, sipping terrible government coffee, when suddenly every alarm starts screaming, Soviet missile launch detected. Not one missile, not two. A full-scale nuclear attack. That's what happened in 1979. And it all began with one person's tiny, stupid, almost adorable mistake. A military technician accidentally loaded a training simulation tape into the real NORAD early warning system. The tape was supposed to simulate a Soviet attack for practice, but the machine doing the reading, it didn't know the difference between pretend missiles and the end of humanity. Suddenly, screens lit up. Commanders panicked. Jets were scrambled. Nuclear forces went into alert. Someone even picked up the presidential hotline, the one used to wake up the president when the world is about to explode. All because one guy put the wrong tape in the wrong machine. Basically, the Cold War version of hitting reply all by accident, but with nukes. For 6 terrifying minutes, U.S. officials genuinely believed the Soviet Union had launched a surprise assault. Imagine the pressure. Sir, is this real? Maybe, possibly, we're not sure. Great, fantastic. Love that for us. Thankfully, someone noticed that satellites and radar weren't confirming the attack, which raised the uncomfortable question. Where are the missiles? Eventually, they realized they were reacting to fake missiles from a simulation tape, a tape that should have never been anywhere near the main system. Imagine being the technician responsible. You come into work thinking it's a normal day, and leave knowing you almost speed ran the apocalypse because you grabbed the wrong file. This moment is still used in military psychology training as the perfect example of how one tiny human error can bring 2 nuclear superpowers to the brink of war. Simple mistake, catastrophic consequences. History saved by pure luck. Number 6. The chef who burned down 1,000,000 acres. Idaho, 1910. One lunch broke the West. Picture a forest ranger in 1910, tired, hungry, underpaid, and surrounded by millions of acres of bone-dry woodland. Now, imagine that same ranger deciding to cook lunch with an open fire during one of the hottest, driest summers in American history. What could go wrong? Everything. Literally everything. A single tiny cooking fire, started by one overworked ranger who just wanted warm beans, sparked the infamous Great Fire of 1910, also called the Big Burn, which eventually scorched 3 million acres, wiped out entire towns, and became one of the most destructive wildfires in U.S. history. Witnesses said the fire moved like a living creature. Wind turned flames into 200-foot walls. Trees literally exploded from heat. Ash fell like black snow over several states. All because one guy was hungry. To be fair, the poor man didn't intentionally summon a fire demon. Conditions were brutal. Drought, lightning storms, no water, barely any manpower. But that's the thing. Enormous disasters often begin with completely normal actions, like wanting lunch. The fire spread so fast that even trained fire crews panicked. Many fled into tunnels, rivers, and mine shafts to survive. Historians estimate that the U.S. Forest Service nearly collapsed because of this single event. Funding, policies, and wildfire strategies were rewritten for decades afterward. In other words, one man wanted a hot meal. The government redesigned American wildfire management. That's the butterfly effect on caffeine. The ranger himself survived, but his tiny cooking decision changed U.S. environmental policy forever. Today we'd call it an oops, but in 1910 it was the kind of mistake that reshaped an entire continent's landscape. Just imagine telling your boss, "Sorry I burned down the West. Beans got out of hand." Number 5. The man who sneezed and sank a fleet. Sweden, 1628. Human allergy versus warship. History is full of noble battles, brilliant strategies, and heroic leaders. And then there's the Swedish Vasa ship, a giant, majestic warship that sank 20 minutes into its first voyage because one worker sneezed at the worst possible time. Yes, really. The Vasa was supposed to be Sweden's naval flex, a floating palace with 64 cannons, gold decorations, and enough firepower to scare every enemy within cannon range. King Gustavus Adolphus demanded it be built taller, heavier, and more intimidating than any ship ever made. But physics had other opinions. The ship was already dangerously unstable. The hull was too narrow, the cannons too heavy, and the center of gravity so high it basically begged to tip over. Still, the king wanted it launched ASAP, so workers scrambled to finish the final setup. During the cannon loading process, one crewman, exhausted from all-night preparation, sneezed so violently that he dropped a tool. The crash startled another worker holding a rope. He let go. That rope controlled one of the ship's port-side gun ports. The gun port slammed open. Water rushed in. Within minutes, the pride of the Swedish Navy rolled onto its side and sank like a terrified brick, right next to the harbor, where everyone, including foreign ambassadors, watched in silent, confused disbelief. $100 million of modern value. Gone. 20 minutes. One sneeze. Of course, the sneeze wasn't the real cause. The ship was poorly engineered from day one, but that tiny human moment, a sneeze, was the domino that pushed the disaster into reality. If he had sneezed 5 seconds later, if he had sneezed facing the other direction, if he had held it in, dangerous but heroically stupid, the ship might have stayed afloat a little longer. Instead, one involuntary bodily reflex became the funniest naval catastrophe in European history. Bless you, random Swedish guy, you accidentally wrote yourself into the history books. Number 4. The clerk who triggered the Tulip crash. Netherlands, 1637. One misheard price started a market collapse. Imagine you're at work, half listening, half daydreaming about lunch, when someone yells across the room, "Hey! Tulips are now selling for X." You hear the wrong number, you repeat it, everyone believes you, and suddenly you've accidentally detonated the world's first economic bubble. Welcome to the chaos of tulip mania. By 1637, tulips were basically Bitcoin made of plants. People sold houses to buy tulip bulbs. Merchants treated flowers like gold bars. It was madness, but profitable madness, until one clerk made the kind of mistake only a sleep-deprived employee can make. During an auction, a price was shouted, an already absurdly high one, but the clerk misheard it, wrote down an even higher price, and announced it as fact. Instant hysteria, buyers panicked, sellers panicked harder. Everyone thought the market had jumped into a new cosmic tier of stupidity. The rumor spread like wildfire. Prices skyrocketed, buy now before it's too late. But then someone checked the numbers, realized the price wasn't actually that high. Confidence snapped like a breadstick. People rushed to sell. Buyers vanished. Contracts collapsed. Fortunes evaporated overnight. An entire economy. Poof. Because one clerk had the auditory accuracy of a potato. Historians debate whether it was intentional manipulation, drunken carelessness, or simple human error. But the ripple effect was undeniable. The Dutch tulip market collapsed so violently that it became a cautionary tale still taught in economic textbooks. And the funniest part? Tulips weren't even rare. People just collectively decided they were valuable, until that one clerical error ended the illusion. A single wrong number, a market-wide panic, the world's first financial bubble popping like a sitcom gag. If you've ever misheard something in a meeting, don't worry. At least you didn't crash the national economy by mishearing a flower price. Number 3. The soldier who started a 27-year war. Mytilene, 406 BCE, one message delivered too late. You know that sinking feeling when you send a text late and it causes drama? Now imagine that same mistake, but it leads to one of the longest wars in ancient Greece. During the Peloponnesian War, timing was everything. Armies moved by foot, ships traveled with the wind, and messages depended on exhausted human messengers sprinting like their sandals were on fire. Enter one unlucky soldier. Athens needed to send a crucial order to its fleet at Mytilene. The message? Don't kill the captured rebels. We've changed our minds. But the soldier overslept. By the time he ran to the docks and delivered the message, the naval commander had already acted on the previous order, the execution order. Hundreds were killed. The mistake detonated political outrage across Greece. Cities rebelled, alliances shattered. Sparta exploited the chaos. What should have been a contained incident spiraled into 27 more years of unpredictable warfare, famine, and shifting power. One man's slow morning became a continent's crisis. Ancient historians roasted this guy. Modern historians sympathize. Because, honestly, who hasn't missed a deadline and ruined everything? It wasn't treason. It wasn't incompetence. It was the most relatable mistake imaginable. A man woke up late. But in the Peloponnesian War, lateness wasn't annoying. It was world-altering. Because when everything relies on single messengers, one bad morning can rewrite history. Number 2. The farmer who created a global famine. Ireland, 1840s. One planting decision changed the world. Imagine planting potatoes. Simple, innocent, peaceful. Now imagine that this one planting choice, trusting a particular potato variety, ends up causing the largest famine in modern European history, killing 1 million people and forcing another million to flee their homeland. In early 1840s Ireland, most farmers relied heavily on a single type of potato, the Irish lumper. It wasn't delicious, but it was hardy and produced huge harvests, a perfect crop for families trying to survive harsh conditions. One farmer, whose name is lost to time, unknowingly planted the first batch of lumpers contaminated with Phytophthora infestans, the fungus responsible for potato blight. He didn't see anything wrong. The potatoes looked normal on the surface. He planted them. They sprouted. But inside, they carried the pathogen that would spread across the entire island. Blight moves fast. The moment sporangia hit the wind, it was game over. Within a single season, fields blackened. Tubers rotted into sludge. Livestock refused to eat them. Farmers cried when entire families' food supply dissolved into ooze overnight. But it all started with that one initial batch, planted by one man who had no idea he was introducing the biological equivalent of a nuclear bomb into Irish agriculture. The devastation reshaped Ireland permanently. Population dropped by 25%. Mass migration to America reshaped U.S. Cities, political revolutions followed. British policies hardened and eventually backfired. Irish culture and demographics changed forever. One farmer, one planting, one microscopic fungus. A disaster that shook continents. It's one of the clearest examples in history of how tiny, invisible mistakes can have consequences so huge they alter entire civilizations. Number 1. The banker who triggered a global panic. 1907. One man said, "No," and Wall Street exploded. Imagine walking into a bank to ask for help, and the moment one powerful banker rejects you, the entire financial world collapses like a folding chair under a heavyweight champion. Welcome to the panic of 1907, a global financial meltdown caused quite literally by one man's refusal to give a loan. Here's how the chaos started. Two businessmen tried to corner the copper market, because of course they did. Nothing good ever starts with rich guys trying to corner things. Their plan failed spectacularly, and they needed a massive emergency loan to keep their company afloat. So they ran to the most respected banker in America, J.P. Morgan. But Morgan wasn't there. He was out of town, leaving his second in command, a man known for being cautious, stiff, and about as flexible as a brick. The businessman pleaded for help. The deputy listened, thought about it, and then said the word that would detonate the U.S. economy. No. That one refusal spread through newspapers like wildfire. People panicked. Investors freaked out. Rumors exploded. If Morgan's bank won't help them, the whole system must be unstable. Within hours, people lined up outside banks demanding their money. Trust companies collapsed. Wall Street erupted into full meltdown. Businesses went bankrupt. The stock market crashed 50%. Riots nearly broke out. Police guarded vaults. Ordinary citizens stuffed cash under mattresses. The chaos spread to Europe, all because one cautious banker didn't want to approve a loan without Morgan present. When Morgan returned and found the country in financial flames, even he couldn't believe how fast it had fallen apart. He spent sleepless nights physically locking bankers in a room until they agreed to rescue the financial system. One refusal, one small decision, one moment of hesitation, and it triggered a chain reaction so catastrophic that the U.S. government eventually created the Federal Reserve to prevent one person from ever causing a financial apocalypse again. It remains one of history's wildest examples of how a simple no, spoken by the wrong person at the wrong time, can shake the entire world. That's it for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe for more.